Hello, I'm Mark Tucker,
Hey there, I'm Alan Furstenberg. We are Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Hey, Alan.
Hey, Mark, how's it going?
Doing okay, I think.
Good to hear. except for this frog that seems to be in both our throats. That's not uncommon this time of year, I guess.
Yeah, I guess not, but guess it's cool enough here. I'm maybe you guys are already into autumn over there. I'm not sure.
The
Northern to the coast.
it was cool a few days ago, and it's warmed up the past couple of days, but the trees are just beginning to change color. So we're getting there, not quite there yet, but awfully close.
Well, so we've officially started autumn as most of the days are only in double digits. We are no longer in triple digits here.
Oh boy.
Good old Arizona.
I think that's, in a lot of ways, though, is one of the things I really find that I enjoy about, the fact we've got this country that spans, a bunch of time
Yes.
zones and is kind of tall enough that we have such a variety, and that you and I can talk about the variety of weather and climate that we have. I enjoy that.
Yeah, it is. It's nice to have diversity and talk about different things along those lines. But guess we're not really here to talk about the weather.
No, we're not really. I can't even think of a way to tie the weather into what we do want to talk about tonight.
So there was a Google conference that happened recently.
Yeah, it was about a month and a half, 2 months ago at this point. And it's called Google Cloud Next. And
So
this is
what is the next part? I know what Google Cloud is, but
so this is, I like to think of it as Google I/O, but for Google Cloud. It's
okay.
basically where the Google Cloud division kind of reveals, the new product offerings, the new capabilities, and announces kind of what's coming next over the next year or so. And by Google Cloud, it's a wide range of things, ranging from the cloud infrastructure stuff, the stuff we would traditionally associate with virtual machine type things,
Right,
to stuff that's offered under Google Workspace. So this is where new enterprise. It's hard to think of a good name for this, and I never really find a good name. But I think of it as kind of like enterprise consumers. So it's not for developers. It's not for people who are building infrastructure. It's for people who want Gmail for their entire enterprise. That's
okay.
under Google Workspace, and that's part of Google Cloud.
So let me see if I'm hearing you correctly. So kind of the audience of this event would be the enterprise.
Yeah.
Developers in some cases, and DevOps.
Yes.
Okay.
So developers, as long as they're doing development aimed at enterprises, enterprise level stuff. DevOps that are aimed at enterprise level stuff, or deploying things that are accessible on a big scale. So this, it ranges from stuff like Firebase, the various Google Cloud offerings. It's Google Workspace, and unsurprisingly this year, it's a lot of Google's AI stuff, which is why we're talking about it.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's good. So what were some of the important? I know that there's like probably too much to cover in one episode here, but what are some of the kind of the highlights?
I would say it's not even just too much to cover. Some of it is, since Google Cloud Next is a big, it overarches a lot of stuff. This is a big conference, and it covers things ranging from AI to Google Docs. That's a really big range of stuff. In fact, they put out a Google blog item labeled all 161 things we announced at Google Cloud Next.
Whoa, that's a big list.
It's a big list, and it missed a few as far as I can tell. That said, we are not going to cover all 161. I think we've got it down to 5 or so that I think are, they were certainly the ones that were most interesting to me.
Right.
And I think they'd be most interested to people who are, following along here.
Okay.
But we will post a link to the full list of 161 for you to peruse. But of the ones that we're looking at, they kind of fell into 2 categories. Stuff that involves a product area in cloud called Vertex AI, which we've talked about a little bit, and stuff under a new offering from Google called Duet AI.
Okay, that'll be interesting to find out more about those.
And we can kind of, the broad split between those kind of boils down to Vertex AI is aimed at people who are looking to develop and deploy AI related stuff in the cloud. And Duet AI is more of enterprise consumer level stuff about prepackaged AI products that people use as part of everything else in cloud. And we'll get to that later. So let's start with the Vertex AI stuff. And we've talked about Vertex AI a bunch in the past. This is where they have their model garden, for example. So, if you've got an AI model that you want to use, this is where you'd be able to find it. We've talked about, this is basically they're lumping a bunch of AI related developer stuff under this platform, this category.
Okay.
But I think the first big announcement that came out, and we actually knew about some of this ahead of time, is what they're now calling Vertex AI Search and Vertex AI Conversation. And this is a platform that has had like 3 different names since Google I/O. But what they do is kind of twofold. One is they allow information to be indexed, and then they let developers pretty much with a no-code tool build an interface, a customer level interface to that information, so that you, in the simplest terms, you have something that looks an awful lot like Google search for your documents or for your website or for your structured data.
Okay.
And that's kind of powerful. And it was, and oddly enough, it was something we only sort of had before. Google has had something they called a search appliance going back a couple of decades now. And, once upon a time, it was this bright yellow box that you could put in your data center. It was really bizarre looking, but it basically contained Google search algorithms for your data. And then recently they've had something called enterprise search, but nobody really knew about it. It wasn't a very well advertised product. This is now saying you can create an index of your website, or you can upload a bunch of what they call unstructured documents, or you can load in a bunch of structured documents, basically JSON files with a particular schema, or even tab separated value stuff or comma separated value stuff with a particular schema. And then kind of with a one button push, make it so that people can ask questions of this data, and it gives references to the documents that have the answers.
Okay.
And on a developer level, there's an API behind this as well. So you can, in your API, upload the documents or populate the index, and you can create your own user interface instead. So instead of just, showing a link to the data, give a more contextual answer to it.
Okay.
That's something that we haven't really seen before from Google. So this is, one of the big criticisms of Google over the years has been, if I have data, wouldn't it be nice if I could search in it somehow? And what company would be good at helping me search through my data?
I wonder.
I wonder. And yet the answer was not Google in the past. Google provided
Interesting.
nothing that could do this. And now they do. Go ahead, you have a question.
I was thinking, so do they talk about like what's the technology kind of under the hood?
No, they don't. Now, they don't come straight out and say this, but we can assume that at least some of this has to do, well, one of the things we do know about it, though, is that we're reasonably sure there's a vector database under there.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And it is creating embeddings for you by default. One of the neat things, though, is that you can bring your own embeddings. So one of the things that you can do when you're using the API side of this is when you load in a document, you also load in the embedding for that document. And then later, when a user generates a search, you can include an embedding for that search so that it uses its magic secret sauce under the covers, but also factors in your embeddings as part of that magic.
Interesting, because the search that you do needs to be the same embeddings model that the data has been indexed with. But
that's why you can provide an embedding both for the data and the search.
Oh, okay.
But it will also use other information that it has. So it's not just an embedding search. It's more complicated than that. And that's kind of Google's secret sauce.
Gotcha.
And in some ways, that's kind of nifty that, you know, if you've got a recommendation system that you already have, but you want to combine it with other things that the user may ask that Google search may come up with, that can be really, you know, you now have a really, really powerful tool that you can tap into. So that's one thing. And then, so that is Vertex AI Search.
Okay.
But the product is known as Vertex AI Search and Conversation. So what's the and conversation part? Well, the and conversation is basically using the same index, more or less, that you've just created for the search side. You now have a chatbot.
Okay, so it's ChatGPT basically against your content.
Yes.
But it's all with Google.
All with Google, and B, it's more sophisticated than that.
Okay.
Because that chatbot isn't just a chatbot. The underlying element of that chatbot is dialogue flow.
Oh, interesting.
So if you wanted to, you now have a full dialogue flow CX system that taps into this exact same index. So as part of dialogue flow CX, and they've kind of hidden some of this, but it's all there, and there are how-tos direct from Google about how to do this. You can create a dialogue flow CX chatbot that uses this index as part of a knowledge base.
Yeah. That
depending on where, you know, it could be, you know, universal throughout your entire conversation flow, or you can narrow an index to a particular part of your conversation flow. So if you've got a conversation that's going on with the user and taking action the same way dialogue flow does, and the user asks a question, you now have a flow contextual way to answer that question.
Oh, very, very cool.
And that's just blows my mind. You know, or if you want, you've just uploaded a bunch of data and it now gives you a bot that answers contextual data, that answers your contextual questions, including the data that you've uploaded.
All right.
Or you get as sophisticated as you want. And I feel like we're going to have Xavier on the show at some point in the future to dive into this some more.
Yeah, no, that sounds interesting.
I've gone into it a little bit. He's gone into it a lot more than I have.
All right. Well,
and that fits nicely in with our conversational AI angles.
Yeah. So it's just going to prove that, you know, things that we've been doing, you know, these last 7-8 years with you know, conversational assistants and other things, it's not going away.
No.
We're just now getting a bunch of new features, new abilities when it comes to answering questions about specific subject matter areas that your assistant might want to be an expert on.
Exactly. So that's, Vertex AI search and conversation, big set of features. It was literally their number 2 thing that they put on their list. And there was a lot of coverage that was given to it. It's exciting technology. I'm diving into it more and more, and every time I do, I keep finding new things.
Well, good. Well, that makes sense. I do like the fact that they're able to, take functionality and do a search piece of it, but then also there's a conversation piece.
Right. I really love the fact that it's kind of the same thing under the hood. You can enhance it a little, and then you can keep enhancing. There's so many ways that you can address this. From here's my rapid proof of concept that I can churn out in a day or two, and I've got an API so that I can refine this into a full-blown conversation or integrate it with other conversations. Can create a whole app around this with our theming and our ways that we want to answer it. Combine it with user data. I can do any level of that, all with the same set of technology. That's really exciting to me.
Yep, no, that is pretty cool.
But you asked, what's the underlying technology behind this? Because we've talked in the past several times about embeddings and vector databases. And one of the things we, several months ago, we kind of idly said, I wonder if Google has a vector database. And to our utter surprise, they did. It was known as Vertex AI Matching Engine. Well, one of the things that came out of Next, although it wasn't on the announcement list, is that Matching Engine now has a new name. And this is kind of part of their, I guess, realization that, oh, hey, this technology is useful. It's now known as Vertex AI Vector Search, which kind of makes it a little bit more clear what it is we're talking about. So maybe people can find it better. Not a huge revolutionary change, but I'm wondering if maybe it's, hinting that there are bigger things to come for this product. It got a rename along with everything else. Maybe that means it's getting, more attention paid to it. So we'll see. We'll see about that one.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to keep an eye out for that.
Yep. So the next item on the list was, again, in Vertex AI. So one of the elements that it was introduced at I/O was what they called the Vertex AI Model Garden. And this was just a place where basically, Google is hosting a bunch of model images. And this was a way for you to find out more about many of those models and start up an instance and launch that instance. Or if it's an API available, how to access the API. One of the things that they announced was that Meta's Llama 2 model was now available in the Model Garden, which meant Google had to license that, because I'm pretty sure Llama 2's license wouldn't have allowed for it otherwise. And Anthropic's Claude 2 model is going to be available soon in the Model Garden.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is Google making available outside models on a Google platform. That's kind of going back to their message of, we are your one-stop shop for everything you need to do with AI.
Well, it's interesting because, one of the things with Hugging Face is that there's lots of different models available. Amazon's announced their Bedrock, where they're talking about the different models that you can host in Amazon.
Bedrock is even more interesting, though, as I'm only slowly beginning to understand this. Many, I don't know if it's all of the Bedrock models, but many of the Bedrock models, including non-Amazon ones, have APIs. So it's a fully managed API service from them, as opposed to a hosted model. With the PaLM API, that's a fully hosted PaLM model, like Text Bison. There's an API endpoint for that. But if you want to use Llama 2, you need to spin up your own endpoint. So you need to spin up a machine that is running the model. And once you've spun that up, it gives you an API, but it's your API at your endpoint.
Okay.
It's not a fully managed service. My understanding, maybe I'm wrong, is that Bedrock is providing fully managed APIs for all of these.
All right. Yeah, that's very, very important for developers as they're kind of investigating what models they might want to experiment with, looking at the different providers, kind of see what's available, what's going to be the easiest thing to incorporate in, what's going to be the best overall,
right? What's going to be most economical,
feature-wise,
right? Feature-wise, what's going to be most economical?
Yep.
I mean, if you need these APIs constantly, yeah, spinning up your own machine might be cheaper. But if you only need it on occasion, having an on-demand API might make more sense.
Yep.
So that's going to be a trade-off that we need to consider as we go forward, and which platform offers what and how and at what cost.
Yes. Lots of decisions for developers. Yeah.
And how easy is it for us to spin it up? Is it really just one click and we now have an instance, or is there more to it?
Yeah.
And that's a discussion that Noble and I have every week, apparently. And that I've had with Roger Kibbe on occasion is how easy and how convenient do we get to it?
Yeah.
But speaking of APIs, the next item, which was kind of interesting, I think it surprised a lot of people, is that Google's now making available two of their models, Text Bison and Chat Bison, with larger context windows. So previously you had to, you only had about 8,000 tokens to send. Now they're upping that to 32,000 tokens, which matches what OpenAI announced, a couple of days earlier. Still not quite where Claude is. I understand Claude's at like 100,000 tokens, but it's a big jump apparently.
Yeah.
There are certainly a lot of applications that could use it, but again, there are trade-offs.
Those tokens ain't free.
The tokens ain't free, and in fact, the larger models cost more. Just
yeah.
Even if you're using the same number of tokens, they will cost more, and they're slower. Just the way that the models end up being tuned has them costing you more in cost and time.
Yeah, you might get better results from the generative content, but if it takes you 12 seconds to do it as opposed to 3 seconds, then that could affect based on if it is a conversational interface or if it's even a chat interface that could be really slow. So
right. And is it a 4-time improvement? Is it 4 times better? Or are there other ways, instead of sending a 32K chunk of text as part of your prompt, are there other better ways that you can do that at a lower cost? Yeah. Sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. But these are now new tools that you have. And I think I like that notion of just, putting more tools into people's hands.
Yeah. Yeah, there is definitely not a lack of options.
No, there is not.
Which is a challenge, right?
You're right. That is a challenge on its own. There were also lots more Vertex announcements. I don't want to say that there weren't, but these were the biggest ones in my mind, and that I kind of was most interested in and most using. I'd certainly love to hear what other people thought, if there were other announcements that really piqued their interest. I'll also put in a link to the developer keynote, which had some great demonstrations and commentary by cloud innovator champions.
Okay.
Who are professionals out there doing some of this work, some of whom I know very well because they're also GDEs, talking about some of the use cases for stuff and what they're doing with it. Some very exciting stuff coming. But one of the things they also talked about was this kind of new product umbrella that they call Duet AI. The general concept of it is that Duet AI in programming and developing, we have this concept of pair programming, where you're programming and you also have somebody else that, you're working together on stuff. This is kind of like that, but for anything that you may be doing in an enterprise. So Duet AI, yes, it's your pair programmer. It's, there is a Duet AI for Google Cloud component that helps you write code. And it's very well tuned for the Google Cloud APIs. But it's also really well tuned for helping you set up machines or helping you set up services in Google Cloud. You can ask it questions and it'll give you answers. It's also really good on the workspace side for helping you do things like write a Word document or find or generate pictures for your slides or do a number of other things that, it's kind of your person sitting next to you helping you do stuff in those applications.
That sounds like an assistant.
Yeah, it does kind of, or what Microsoft is calling a co-pilot.
Interesting.
So some of these are already out there and available right now. So, if I believe in Google Slides, for example, if you click on, if you click to add an image, it'll ask, do you want to generate an image to add? That's now an option, as well as searching the web and uploading an image yourself.
Okay, I haven't played around with that yet.
So, I've used it a little bit, and it's okay. If you've done Google's image generation stuff, it's not bad. It's not, stable diffusion at incredibly high resolution that, takes hours to generate, but it's not bad. And we're seeing this across the entire range of Google Cloud. So if you're working with BigQuery, for example, there's now a Duet AI that helps you with BigQuery. If you are doing security stuff, there are now Duet AI components that help you with the security stuff. It's really kind of their brand name for consumer, I keep using the word consumer because I'm not sure, maybe it's professional level tools. It's not developers. Developers can't tap into these things. There's no API for them. But professionals have access to them.
Well, so there's developers building applications that use it, which doesn't sound like it can, but right. I use some sort of an AI when I'm like batting around ideas or learning something new about code. So it sounds like Duet for Code would really, fall into a tool that developers would use.
Right, but developers are using it in their professional capacity.
True.
They're not using, they're not developing something against it or with it or for it.
Yeah.
You as a programmer have your companion that's helping you do your work. Just like somebody who is drafting an email has a companion that is helping them do their work. Just like somebody who is making slides has a companion that is helping them do their work. This is a professional companion, a professional assistant.
All right. No, that sounds good.
So
I like that. I definitely see that as something that, workers, employees are going to be using assistants for a wide variety of jobs. And it looks like Google's tying that into their products.
Google's tying that into everything. And that's, well, but again, so is Microsoft. I mean, that's the Microsoft Copilot is doing similar things. I think the question in both cases is going to be, at some point in the future, do we get a way to tap into that as developers? If these become the professional assistants, how do we create professional assistants for other tasks, other file types, other, other jobs that we as professionals need to do? How do we how do we leverage the exact same infrastructure that's there? If I'm building something for for the HR payroll system, that's not something that Google necessarily has. It's not something necessarily Google is interested in doing.
Yeah.
but I may be interested in doing it as it ties into our calendaring and scheduling system,
Yeah.
for example. If I'm, responsible for maintenance in my building, how does that tie in with my scheduling system? Because I may need to block out rooms based on whatever kind of maintenance I'm doing at a given time.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to have an assistant there doing it? Maybe. How do I make it the same assistant? Yeah. And I think that's going to be a question that will be answered over the next few years. Months.
Yeah, I can definitely see it, because I went from, I don't know, a year ago, not necessarily using other tools other than my ability to, search on the internet to find answers and put things together, to using something that helps formulate code or like answer questions, and knowing that the quality of that can improve over time so that it gets better and better if it's focused on a specific thing. I can see that being a really big plus. So you can trust it more with the answers that you're getting, as opposed to, all right, it looks kind of okay, let me try what it suggests, and then, okay, that wasn't it, but that does make me think of something else. And then,
yeah, so I think we're going to be seeing these professional assistants hanging around us more and more. So, they announced, so when I went through, I counted 9 different mentions of Duet AI across a wide variety of stuff. So that will be something that I think is a big thing, and we're going to see it getting bigger on the Google side.
So Google is going to duetify all the things.
Certainly all the things that are cloud and workspace related, yes, which is a lot of things. So we'll see where it all goes. So those were the things that jumped out at me. There were certainly other things on the list that were interesting, that I think people, if you are really interested, if you do a lot of work with BigQuery, for example, there were a bunch of BigQuery announcements in there, some of which were generative AI related. If you're doing
BigQuery Studio, so yeah, that was one of the things that popped out to me, is just some of the different things with BigQuery. So there's lots of different things in addition to what we talked about. What were some of the other things that jumped out at you?
No, it was there's just lots of BigQuery stuff that I know people who do BigQuery will find fascinating. There was a lot of talk about some new SQL databases and Aurora DB and how that's going to fit into everything. So lots of talk there that, if you're using databases, and who isn't using databases, you'll find useful stuff there. If you're into the hardware side, there were all sorts of chip announcements, which went way over my head. But people who are, trying to eke out specific levels of performance, you care about that. So there are new announcements there. So, like I said, 161 announcements, not least of which is announcing when the next is going to be. So they already announced next year's event and where and when it's going to be located. So it'll be it's going to be next year in Las Vegas. So they're moving it out of San Francisco, I think, for the first time. And it's going to be April of next year.
All right.
So hopefully I'll be able to go to that one. Going to try to make it to that one next year. And I'm curious to see what other people both found interesting from this year's, and kind of what they're looking forward to, what they wished we saw more about.
Yeah.
Just in general, cloud is big, and there's a lot of stuff there that wasn't just generative AI, but what are the kind of the tools that we see as most important coming out of this? So I'd love to hear what other folks think. You can find us in our usual haunts, leave a message below, and we'll talk about these sorts of things another time on Two Voice Devs.
Two Voice Devs. Take care, Alan.
You too, Mark. Have a great week.
All right.